morning, everyone. And for the ones who are here today and for the ones who are joining us online. And for respect of the Spanish language, I'm going to speak in Portuguese, which is my native language. It's a pleasure to moderate this panel that is going to focus on disruptive technologies, and I would like to thank Alacero for inviting me here today for such an important and relevant topic that we in a world where we're living. I am a metal specialist from the University of Brazil, and we breathe the traditional metal industry. And we haven't spoken a lot about different technologies in different productive methods. Now we have the electric metallurgy, and well, we always wanted to work in a comprehensive company, and I worked in Sidermetal in Victoria, living in a comprehensive way, and the solutions regarding the decarbonization of the industry started for some time now, and they have become stronger and stronger every year. It's clear that we are in an non-turning around path, and I started a strategy for the unit of Tubarão in a company, and I'm in the front part of the committee for this, and I'm fascinated with the challenge that we have to transform the metal industry into a steel industry for the next generations. And I know that I don't know anything about the changes and the processes that are coming because they are too accelerated. And we see some claims in terms of the concrete and immediate actions. Decarbonization goes beyond these cycles and natural gas and nitrogen. We need to depend on these disruptive technologies to have a sustainable path to consider the regional needs of the industry. There's no unique solution for decarbonization. A unit should be enabled depending on the specific characteristics of each one of us, depending on the location and the goods that they have, the resources, and we have a lot of challenges in front of us, the availability of raw materials, and we need green hydrogen, and the scalability of these technologies is very important, specifically for an industry where almost everything is at a great scale. Like in World Steel, we produce 70 millions of hydrogen, 70 million tons. It's close to 1% that comes from the water electrolysis, 70% of natural gas and 20% of carbon. So if we migrated everything towards green hydrogen, we would have 3,700 terawatts per hour, and this is more than the annual energy of the European Union. So the International Energy Agency, in 2050, the green hydrogen will be 277 million tons, which is an increase of 400%. So we have some challenges and great developments to consider. We need to consider the operation costs. We need to keep the competitiveness of the developing countries, and the disruptive technologies that we're going to be talking about are very promising, specifically for Latin America. From one side, we have the production of green hydrogen, and despite all the challenges that we have in terms of production and distribution, it represents a great opportunity for the location and the region because of the benefits that we have. We have the benefit of being one of the main players, and the carbon capture's utility storage is very useful, because with green hydrogen we can continue using it, and the Inflation Reflection Act in the United States is going to develop this technology, and it's going to have a boom, and Latin America is highlighted again as a very important power for this type of energy storage. We have expectations of 1.3 gigatons in the country and in Mexico, and 103 gigatons in Europe. And I'm going to quote one of the poets, and the ones who dare seeing beyond are the ones who are going to discover how far we can go. Now, Alexander, I'm going to give you the floor. Muchas gracias. Una solicitud.
To the prime metals one, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, meanwhile, warm welcome from my end. Thanks for having me here on the stage. So, my name is Alexander Fleischner from Prime Metals, and just meanwhile, spending 1 minute on Prime Metals. Prime Metals is a world leader in metallurgical plant solutions and having the full portfolio, full value chain in the portfolio, starting from iron ore mining down to the finished steel product. And thanks for changing it. And Prime Metals has about 7,000 employees worldwide. I'm one of these employees, and I was just amazed by one of the last panel discussions when we talked about education, about recruitment and retention of the people. So I was quite alarmed. I'm working in this industry for 26 years, actually. So either it's my slow pace in learning, or the other way around. I believe it's quite an exciting industry. I'm learning day by day, and one of the things that is super amazing is actually this transitioning ahead for the steel industry, turning into green, talking about hydrogen, decarbonization, carbon capture, and so on. So I'm going to kick off this panel talking about challenges first before we move further to the solutions part. And there are a couple of challenges that we are facing. So we have been producing around 1,900 million ton of steel in the year of 21. And unfortunately, 70% of this steel was running on coal, so a high figure. And this was producing for each ton of steel 1.85 ton of CO2 was released. So the challenge is big. The overall scope 1 and scope 2 was around 3.6 gigaton of CO2 released, and steel sector is now the number one from the industrial emitters, just ahead of the cement industry, and that relates to 8 to 9% of the global carbon emissions. Well, steel is going to grow. It's basically a good thing for the steel producers. So all of us, even the acceleration is just about 0.5% in the growth rate that is expected till 2050. So we will end up, and that's our forecast, at around 2.2 billion ton of steel in 2050. The growth is mainly driven by two factors. The first one is by India and Southeast Asia. They will quickly continue to grow. But on the other hand, also the electrification. So PV and the wind energy requires specifically per megawatt installed more steel than any of the gas or coal-fired power plants. The decarbonization in steel will require massive amount of renewable power, and that's actually the biggest roadblock we are talking in a minute. The good thing is that obviously a green steel market, so on the demand side, is going to be established. So it's expected, if we listen to all the reports, then in 2050, more than 75% of all the steel from the end customers, they will request and demand decarbonized steel, and that's the major driving force for the decarbonization. Well, I don't hold the actual figures from the COP27, so we are still looking forward to the report this week. But in the last COP, about 137 countries have pledged to become net carbon zero. And this covers about 90% of the steel production from the countries that have committed to get net zero. There's a little bit of different pace. Like Brazil just in 2060, like Russia and China as well, and India just by 2070, while all the others have pledged to become net zero in 2050. One of the major drivers seems to be a tax system, so a penalty system that was established in Europe and quickly accelerating the price also with the Green Deal and following with the pandemic on the ETS scheme for the carbon capture trading. Meanwhile, a lot of countries and growing month by month are implementing either a tax system or similar ETS scheme. So that's one of the promoters to go into decarbonization. While not only this penalty system, but the other side is also a support by funding. That is as important than the penalty system. So especially in Europe, and Ludmila was just saying also the hype around the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, providing big support in accelerating the decarbonization. Well, talking about the major roadblocks of the steel sector, the first one is raw materials. So basically, I'd like to talk about two raw materials, one slide each. First one is steel scrap. It's the perfect way to reduce the carbon footprint is simply to melt infinitely the scrap at the end of the life cycle. Unfortunately, there isn't enough scrap in the market, and it won't be even in 2050. So the red curve on the top is the steel production since 1960 till today. And what it's forecasting is that there will be an increase in the steel productivity by around 250 million ton till 2050, while the scrap availability will increase by more than 500 million ton, according our own scrap availability models. So the good thing is there will be more scrap in the market over the years, and basically it's from the hype of the installed base from China and Asia. So the average lifetime of all the different type of scrap is around 43 years. So we have to wait for that scrap, but at the end it will reduce the carbon footprint because we can use less virgin material, meaning iron ore. Well, with scrap there is another issue, and that's the tramp elements. Every year we add a number of new steel grades, always going into advanced high-strength steel, ultra-high-strength steel, and so on. And the tramp elements are limiting for the steel properties to achieve them. So one of the major breakthrough innovation fields we have to focus on in the steel sector is the topic of grafted scrap. So really treating scrap, analyzing scrap, fully digitalize the full value chain of the scrap management. Well, moving to the second raw material, and second raw material of importance is iron ore, obviously, and that graph is showing actually the around 2.5 billion ton of seaborne iron ore that is traded or has been traded, and it's also showing the different type of qualities in respect of the iron content. So there are some countries that have the advantage having quite high iron content in the iron ore, like Russia, Iran, or the Sweden. And this high-grade iron ore today exclusively goes into shaft-based direct reduction furnaces. So we produce a bit more than 100 million ton of DRI today. So 160 million ton of this high-grade iron ore is going there, and that's shown basically at the bottom right. Well, if we address the lower grade iron ore and we see less blast furnaces in the market due to the transition, so we will blow down year by year more and more blast furnaces, there's no doubt, to go out of coal. We will have to deal with this lower grade iron ores also in the direct reduction, and that's a new challenge ahead. The direct reduction can manage it, but finally we will have to get rid of the high gang of the slag in a new type of electrified process, a smelter, reducing type electric furnace. The next roadblock is the energy transition, and likely it's the biggest roadblock ahead, as I said. Electrification the transition of the steel sector requires massive amount of renewable energy. And just providing one slide here to give a little bit of more of context. To produce 1 million ton of direct reduced iron only based on hydrogen, it requires around 500 megawatt electrolyzer capacity. So as we know, the state-of-the-art modules of direct reduction are 2 million to 2.5 million tons, so we talk about 1 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity. So also that is massive. This brings me to the energy cost. It's a new play field, I have to say. Before we have been used that, well, we are talking about commodities, steel, scrap, iron ore, and the price level, even if being a bit different around the globe, but was pretty balanced. If we look at the energy prices recently, it's much different. So this has a strong impact, and we have to be aware that iron making, so the upstream part of the steel sector, is the most energy relevant part of the steel production. So the price of energy is a decisive factor where transition is going to happen in the future. So if we look into the region, maybe the best place for low-priced renewable energy is Chile, but there are also other good opportunities, I would say Brazil, Colombia, US, Canada, the Middle East. All these places, energy is much cheaper compared to Europe, Japan, or other places. So this graph on the left side is basically showing where energy, so electric energy and gas, natural gas, prices are at a reasonable level if we talk about transitioning the steel sector. So the last but not least roadblock, very closely related to the energy price, is the location transition. So there is a big question mark today where this large number of direct reduction plants or electric arc furnaces will finally be placed. And as said, we talk about competitiveness. I took one example here. We could take many more, but this example is talking about Japan and Australia. So Australia is one of the countries that have big potential for renewable energy at a reasonable price, and they have, it's the biggest mining country in the world, with around 900 million ton of iron ore that is shipped into the markets. So the big question mark is why not placing a direct reduction facility there where the energy is cheap and the iron ore is, and ship then the intermediate product, the HBI or pig iron around the world, like here into Japan. So this is a pending question ahead of us. So from the challenges now to the solutions, that's the most important part. And we see this definitely as a phased approach. So the first phase is ongoing now for a couple of years already, and this is the optimization phase. All the technology improvements, the improvements in raw materials, energy efficiency measurements to be implemented, and we've done a catalog of measures, around 65 different measures from iron ore beneficiation to the electric arc furnace, continuous casting, what can be done. But if you add all these improvement measures up, you end up at a carbon reduction level of 30%, and that's it. So it's not enough to achieve net zero at the end. So we have to talk about this transitioning phase. That's the phase 2, and we just kicked this transition phase off in this year, I would say, with the first projects that have been announced and kicked off. And the transitioning phase means it's the first time ever that traditional integrated steel plants implement an electric arc furnace to partly replace blast furnace capacity coking plant with an electric arc furnace aside. It's also the transitioning phase talking about coupling of processes. Direct casting and rolling has a big potential in the market because it simply avoids the reheating of slabs of billets based on fossil-fired reheating furnaces. And it's implementing the first carbon capture and utilization plants, and that's basically then also the major talk of CSR just after next mine. Sorry, so now I missed the most important phase. That's then the green steel phase, and that's being based on renewable energy. So all the electric arc furnaces powered by renewable energy only if it is available at a reasonable price and in the amount required. Then it's also possible to run on hydrogen, the direct reduction plant. So we can start now based on natural gas, and whenever hydrogen becomes available at a reasonable price, we switch to green or blue hydrogen. And last but not least, the third pillar in the decarbonization is simply the carbon capture and utilization. So there have been a large number of projects that have been announced over the past 12 months. So we counted around 80. And it's a bit astonishing that the by far largest number of projects has been announced in Europe, despite the high energy prices. And the main reason is simply because there's a support from the governments. There is the ETS scheme. So adding both topics simply brings the return on investment in these transitioning projects. So one example I said, direct casting and rolling I'd like to mention is coupling. So on the bottom line you see the traditional way of an integrated route ending up with 2.2 ton of CO2 per ton of crude finished steel product, And on the top line, you see an alternative route, fully electrified with an electric arc furnace. In this case, a quantum electric arc furnace doing scrap preheating with the waste gas from the furnace, the most energy efficient electric arc furnace in the world, followed then by direct casting and rolling, this case with Avidi ESP, fully electrified, no reheating furnace. And even considering now the OECD grid factor on the power with 226 gram per kilowatt hour in 2019. which was taken here, we end up at around 300 kilogram of carbon emissions only. So it's a big step forward. That's about the quantum electric arc furnace, and it's really worth saying. The first one has been installed here in Mexico at Tayasa. It has become pretty much a success. So in the past 2 years, another 11 of these furnaces have been commissioned in Asia at less than 300 kilowatt hours per ton of steel, using the preheating of the scrap with the waste gas. So moving to the green steel phase, it requires the triangle. It's pretty clear the pathways we are following to achieve the green steel. So that's the sustainability pathway I mentioned. But there are two more important points. The one is secure the material pathway, the energy availability, and the other one is competitiveness. So we can't just go into the new technologies if we are competitive with the final steel product. So finally, we will have to build the whole hydrogen ecosystem, the carbon capture ecosystem around, and that's likely the most important slide of that presentation. So please pay attention here, because it's showing the forecasted transition pathway of the global steel sector. And just look on the 2050 scale. So while the steel sector is just growing slowly, but the big challenge ahead is simply the size of the transformation. If you look on the scrap EAF, this is expected to add about 370 million ton of scrap-based EAFs, so a large number of new EAFs in the market. And the other one, even bigger, is based on direct reduction, also electrified, again with electric arc furnace or a smelter, depending on the iron ore quality. So we talk about more than 900 million ton that has to be transitioned, new process routes in the market, and that's a massive change of this industry.
Alexander.
So I'm not running through this project, as I got already design, used the time up, but these are 5 examples of projects that are real. So it's not pledges, it's not announcement, but they kicked off, they have been groundbreaking, there are the investments there, and these are real transition projects in the market.
Alexander,
direct reduction is playing a major role, actually, and I'd like to say that direct reduction portfolio technology is very important. That's why we at Primetals focus a lot on the direct reduction. And beside that, we are licensee of the Midrex technology for 42 years. We recently signed an agreement with POSCO on the high-rex technology.
Alexander, sorry, can we wrap up?
Yeah,
sorry,
I'm going to wrap up.
Thank you.
So then that's my handover to Cesar on the last pillar, and that's the carbon capture and utilization pathway. We will have a high share of carbon capture also in the steel sector. So the International Energy Agency is forecasting that finally all the blast furnaces that remain, more than 50% will be equipped with carbon capture, and we're talking up to 700 million ton of CO2 be captured. That picture is showing the largest project that has been executed on carbon capture. Petronova at the power plant with around 5,000 ton of CO2 per ton, executed by Mitsubishi Heavy Industry, which is our parent company. And that's my last one. Talking about the utilization, not only capturing, but a good opportunity on the utilization. And I'd like to mention Lancedec, Primetals, and also ArcelorMittal, which is a great cooperation, and I guess we're talking about cooperation in the panel then. Further on, it's biofermentation technology, taking the blast furnace waste gas and converting it with microbes into bioethanol there. And the inauguration of that plant is just ahead. It's the picture on the right-hand side. In the inauguration will be in December. So there's a long, leaving carbon behind, it's a long, bumpy road ahead. The technology is there, and we will do it. So thank you for your kind attention, and over to you, Cesar.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Buenos días, mi nombre es César Pulido. Antes que nada, muchísimas gracias en nombre de Baker Hughes por darnos la oportunidad de poder participar en
The opportunity to participate in this event. Congratulations to everyone for the great organization. And most certainly, there is a lot of topics of interest here as a set. So we had a small video, but I'm going to skip through that and go into the Baker Hughes presentation. I want to tell you who we are. So we are a company based in supporting energetic transition in terms of technology, for which our commitment is towards supporting in the trilemma on generating energy in a safer and cost-efficient way that is also sustainable throughout the time. So in order to get that in our organization, we have two different areas. The first one is the oil services and oil equipment, which has all of the range of services from characterizations of reservoirs to the well building and also the development of oil fields. And also in the industrial sector, we have energy and industrial energy technologies, where we have the whole range of turbines for the generation, and the first turbine that works 100% on hydrogen. And we also complement with other technologies at climate solution technologies, and we have implemented in artificial intelligence. This is all to support our moving forward in the requirements for the energy. And we believe that in order to talk about energy, we need to understand what energy is. And basically, in the energy sector, we have evolved throughout time based on invention and reinvention of our own industry. And actually, energetic transition is not new. We have transitioned from carbon to natural gas, and then we lived the shale revolution, and then we are talking more and more about renewable energies, with which our important point in this inflection point where we are, what we were living about the VUCA world, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. We require development in terms of the technology development for the tools that the world needs, and getting this 1.5 degrees of reduction in the Paris Agreement. And for that, technology needs to go hand in hand with collaboration. This collaboration is essential to implement the technologies that will lead us to these decarbonization objectives in the world. For that, in this occasion, I want to tell you about carbon sequestration, its utilization, and its underground storage. This is no new technology, and actually in the oil and gas industry, we have been working with it for over 100 years. And when we extract hydrocarbon, we separate CO2 so that we can efficiently and cost effectively make the transportation for natural gas and oil. And the CO2 is re-injected into the reservoir to stimulate the production and extend the useful life for that field. So that technology is extrapolated, and the first developments at CCUS were in 1930 in the US, the first project for long scope in 1972. And despite the need there is to incorporate this technology and into the decarbonization technologies, there are about 20 projects in the world where we are capturing 40 million tons per year. But when we see the challenges that we have today in the world, there are three key factors we cannot lose sight of. The first one is that 75% of today's energy comes from hydrocarbons. So, although we have an energetic transition, in the decades to come, we are still going to use hydrocarbons. So, the challenge is to create that energy more friendly with the environment. The second point is that we need to go faster. At this pace, we will not reach those objectives. By 2050, we need about 1,700,000 tons of carbon sequestration, and we only have 20 projects able to capture only 40 million. So we have a long way to go. And then, as I said, there's no unique solution. There are lots of technologies, lots of emergent technologies, and that's why it is important to make collaboration. Within the different technologies, we have technology prior to combustion, posterior to combustion, and then we do the capture in the emissions area. And all these technologies need to be evaluated in a sense that goes hand in hand with the nature in the project being developed. All of the projects are tailor-made, and you need to evaluate geographical operations and other elements so that you can do the right choice for the right technology that you will use for carbon capture, and also geoscience that needs to evaluate whatever goes into the field to interpret operation conditions and do operations in a safer way. And when we see what it represents for the industry, not just for energy or the industry in general, but also for the steel industry, carbon capture, what we see is that the infrastructure there is to transport CO2 is limited. And according to studies we have seen, from the Net Zero American Association. In the US, where they have about 85% of the projects, as you can see on the slide, there will be a need for over 110,000 kilometers of ducts to transport all the CO2. But this need is very interesting because the quality of materials and the requirements we will have for those materials will lead to corrosion. As you see, CO2 is related with corrosion and the need to develop metallurgy and materials that are apt for work, not just for the ducts, but the whole infrastructure that will be in the surface, the tanks, heat exchangers, and other elements, that will cause for this potential for CCUS to be interesting for the general industry. According to the statistics in the International Agency of Energy, the CCO2 has the ability to capture 50% of all the emissions at a global level. So that's why it is important to continue to move on with this technology. When we look forward, the future at CCUS, because we're talking about 40 projects, but on the shorter term, we see that in the development of all of the policies and the implementation of the carbon taxes in certain countries and the exchange and the cap and trading and everything else and the carbon tax, in the specific case of the UK, there's a good funding. Over £1 billion were targeted to developing projects by 2030, and we see the American projects by 2030, and see the same way what we see in Europe. So all of these projects have great opportunities ahead. So on Baker Hughes, we have invested over $1 million investing in technology, especially for carbon capture in the different technologies. And we have also moved on in everything related with the hydrogen and some other digital technologies and IT technologies so that we can complement the range of products. Within these disruptive technologies that we've developed, not just for carbon capture, in order to capture everything that relates with efficiency, we have gotten support from data-driven processes to analyze and implement artificial intelligence solutions using drones to detect fugitive gases. We work with bots so that you can reduce the human staff, and we have implemented technologies so that we can perforate wells in Colombia and Argentina so that we can reduce the amount of people working at oil platforms, and at the same time we are solving the fact of using Sigma experts to have solutions increasing efficacy, and through all these elements to be able to contribute to development of effective solutions for the reduction of carbon emissions. So when we talk about that, it is impossible to reach carbon neutrality working in an isolated manner. So we need to work in a collaboration so that we can join our efforts to share technology and accelerate the pace that we need so that we can achieve the objectives the world is demanding. With which I want to close with an example of the impact of the oil and gas industry, where we see how to achieve the impact of a 10% reduction of our emissions, contributing to 35% of the emissions globally. So the contribution that we all have at the oil industry, the cement industry, and the energy industry is significant so that we can achieve this goal of making a cleaner industry that is more friendly and sustainable for the environment. Lastly, I want to leave you with all my references on which we founded this presentation, and I will be more than glad to take your questions or elaborate more on other topics. Thank you very much. Well, as you can see, this technological, disruptive technologies is abundant. And actually, this is just a little bit of this whole world. But given the time constraint and respect for, out of respect for the other panels, I'm sorry, we will not have a Q&A section. But all panelists are available to take your questions at some other time. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you all.